It was one of those late summer evenings when the city refused to move. The air shimmered with heat rising from car roofs, and the endless honking of horns blended into a dull urban symphony. Ihor sat behind the wheel of his old gray Honda, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel, half listening to a podcast he wasn't really paying attention to. He sighed. Another day, another traffic jam, he muttered to himself. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed the car next to him, a small blue Peugeot. Inside, a girl with long dark hair was leaning out the window, humming quietly to herself, tapping the steering wheel like she was playing along to an invisible beat. She didn't look frustrated like everyone else. She looked calm, peaceful. When their eyes met, she smiled. That simple, effortless smile that could melt the noise of the city in an instant. Ihor smiled back. The traffic moved forward a few meters. They moved together, then stopped again. Hey, Ihor called out, rolling down his window. I think our cars are officially in a relationship. They've been next to each other for 20 minutes. She laughed, a soft, musical sound. Then maybe we should introduce ourselves. I'm Vika. Ihor, he said, nice to meet you, traffic neighbor. And just like that, something started. Small, light, but real. They talked between red lights and slow crawls. About coffee, about bad drivers, about how both of them dreamed of escaping the city someday. The traffic became a bridge, not a prison. When they reached a small cafe by the road, Ihor pointed to it. We could wait for the city to move, or we could move first. Coffee? Vika smiled. I vote coffee. They parked, walked in, and something clicked. The smell of rain, laughter, warm lights. Hours passed like minutes. When they finally stepped outside, the traffic was gone, but neither of them wanted to leave. If it wasn't for that jam, she said softly, we'd never have met. Then I hope the city jams again tomorrow, Ihor replied. Weeks passed. They texted, met again, laughed more, shared playlists, dreams, and late-night drives. It wasn't long before I turned into we. They fell in love slowly, naturally, like sunrise, not fireworks. They started spending weekends together, driving without destinations, turning ordinary moments into memories. Whenever traffic hit, they'd look at each other and grin. Remember where it all started? A year later, Vika got a job offer, a dream one, but in another city, 3 hours away. When she told Ihor, she was excited and scared at once. It's everything I've wanted, but it means being apart. He looked at her, then smiled gently. You have to go. We'll figure it out. Distance came. Calls, messages, empty evenings, but they stayed. They learned that love isn't about being side by side every second. It's about still reaching for each other even when miles apart. Every weekend, he drove to see her. Sometimes she surprised him by showing up at his door. And every hug reminded them that distance could stretch time, but not feelings. When she finally returned to the city months later, he met her with flowers. You found your dream? He asked. I did, she said, and I found my way back to you. They moved in together, a small apartment filled with plants, laughter, and the smell of coffee. Life wasn't perfect, but it was real. They worked hard, chased dreams. Ihor opened his own car workshop. Vika started a small design studio filled with flowers and sketches. Then one day, she came home holding a letter. I got accepted, she said. A design program in Italy, 3 months. He froze for a second, then smiled. Then you have to go. Roads always lead home. 3 months apart, calls at night, photos from cobblestone streets, videos from his workshop. They missed each other, but they grew stronger. When she returned, he met her at the airport with a cardboard sign, still stuck in traffic for you. She ran to him, laughing and crying all at once. That night, while driving through the city, he pulled out a small silver ring. It's not fancy, he said, but it's us, real, patient, and strong. She whispered, You think we can handle all the red lights ahead? He smiled. We already did. Their wedding was simple. A small garden behind a cafe, fairy lights, close friends, the smell of rain and coffee in the air. Remember when we met? She whispered at the altar. How could I forget? He said. You were the most beautiful thing in that traffic jam. And you were the only one who didn't honk, she laughed. Their vows weren't about perfection. They promised patience, laughter, forgiveness, and morning coffee, always. When they kissed, the whole world felt quiet again. After the ceremony, they didn't go anywhere far. They just drove, through the same streets, the same lights. Vika leaned her head on his shoulder. So this is it, she whispered. The next chapter. Yeah, he said softly. No more traffic jams. Just roads we choose together. Years passed. They built their lives from scratch. Long days, small victories, late night talks. Sometimes they argued, sometimes they fell asleep holding hands mid conversation. Every morning, coffee on the balcony. Every evening, gratitude. One rainy night, they were stopped at a red light again. The reflection of the streetlights danced on the wet road. Vika looked at him and smiled. Strange, isn't it? Everything started because the city stopped moving. He looked at her with quiet warmth. Maybe the city stopped so we could start. The light turned green. The car rolled forward. And the world, loud, busy, chaotic, somehow felt perfectly still again. Because some love stories don't begin with fireworks. They begin with brake lights. And two hearts patient enough to wait. Years went by quietly, not in silence, but in peace. Ihor and Vika's life slowly filled with the kind of beauty that doesn't shout. Mornings with sleepy laughter and coffee mugs, evenings with soft music, the smell of rain through the open window, and the comfort of knowing that no matter how chaotic the world outside became, they always had each other. Sometimes they'd still drive at night, just for the feeling of motion. Empty streets, headlights cutting through the dark. Vika would rest her head against the window and whisper, "It's funny. We used to dream of escaping the city, but now I think we built our own quiet place right here." Ihor would reach for her hand and answer, "We didn't escape it. We changed it." One spring morning, as they sat on the balcony, Vika looked at him with that spark in her eyes again. "What if we finally do it?" she said. "Move to the sea. Open your workshop there. I could design from anywhere. Just start fresh." He looked at her, sunlight touching her hair, the city hum below them, and smiled. "You really think we can leave all this behind?" "I don't want to leave it behind," she said. "I just want to take the best parts with us." A few months later, they packed their lives into boxes, left the apartment that had been their world, and drove south. No rush, no plan, just a car full of dreams, a playlist of old songs, and the road stretching ahead. The sea welcomed them like an old friend. The first night, they stood barefoot on the sand, waves touching their feet. Vika leaned into Ihor and whispered, "Do you hear that? That's what peace sounds like." He laughed quietly. "No traffic, no noise. Are we sure we're still on Earth?" They found a small house near the shore. Nothing fancy, white walls, blue windows, a garden that smelled of salt and lavender. Ihor opened a small garage, fixing boats and cars for the locals. Vika worked from a desk by the window, sketching designs with the ocean as her background music. Every evening, they'd sit on the porch watching the sun melt into the water. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they didn't need to. Words had become optional between them. They already spoke the same silence. One night, as they sat watching the stars, Vika placed Ihor's hand on her stomach. He looked at her, eyes wide, heart suddenly still. She smiled softly. "Looks like our story's getting a new passenger." He couldn't speak, just pulled her close, feeling her heartbeat under his palm, the ocean whispering somewhere behind them. Months later, when their daughter was born, they named her Mira, from the word mirror, meaning both peace and world. Ihor often joked she was born because the world finally moved again. Vika smiled. "No," she'd whisper. "She was born because we stopped long enough to find what really matters." Years later, Mira grew into a thoughtful, creative young woman, curious about the world, but always returning to the calm of the sea and the warmth of her parents' love. One evening, she sat between Ihor and Vika on the porch, the sky burning orange as the sun disappeared behind the waves. "Mom, Dad," she said suddenly, "how did you two actually meet? You always tell me it was in traffic, but that can't be true. Nobody falls in love in traffic." Vika laughed softly. "That's exactly what happened. Your father was bored, I was listening to music, and the whole city just stopped." Mira frowned. "So you just talked through your car windows?" Ihor nodded. "Pretty much. Your mom laughed at my terrible joke, and that was it." "That's so weird," Mira said, smiling. "You mean if the city hadn't stopped that day, I wouldn't even exist?" "Exactly," Vika said. "Sometimes the universe has to slow everything down just so you end up in the right place." Later that night, Ihor and Vika sat outside again. The moonlight brushed across the waves, soft and silver. Ihor held her hand and said quietly, "You know, I still can't believe how far we've come. From the city lights to this." Vika leaned her head on his shoulder. "We didn't plan it," she said. We just kept driving forward. Years turned into decades, yet the rhythm of their lives remained the same: gentle, steady, unhurried. Even as lines of experience softened their faces, silver streaked through Vika's hair and touched Ihor's temples, their connection never faded. Sometimes they still visited the city. They'd drive through the same streets where it all began, stop at the same cafe, even park in the same spot where their cars once stood side by side. The city had changed, but the feeling hadn't. One night, Ihor looked at the traffic stretching down the road and smiled. "Looks like the city's stuck again," he said. Vika laughed. "Maybe someone else is meeting right now, just like we did." He turned to her, eyes soft. "Then I hope they're patient enough to wait for the green light." They drove home, hand in hand, their old car humming softly beneath the stars. And as the road curved along the coast, the waves glimmered in the moonlight, endless, gentle, and free. Somewhere behind them, the city still pulsed with noise and headlights. But here by the sea, life moved at its own pace, slow, steady, and full of love that had learned to last. Because love, real love, doesn't care about the speed of the world. It waits, it finds, and it keeps moving, even when everything else stops.